Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, Quaid, WSD, Logan, and Jessica. And we're going to be talking about the belief in free will relevant to, intelligence, consciousness, order, causality, all that sort of stuff, because it's sort of George's idea. So maybe I'll turn it over to George, and George can explain what he means and what he wants to discuss about these things.
Okay, so basically we start from the premise that, we human beings have no free will, that no living organism has a free will. And so, from that premise, our intelligence really isn't ours. It comes to us from, again, this is what this podcast will be about. Our consciousness really isn't ours. And, it comes from, and so let's explore how we describe, the nature of what's governing not just us, what makes us do whatever we do, but what makes the universe, everything in the universe, behave the way it does. All right, so starting out like that, does anyone want to start it? Logan, Quaid?
Yeah, I'll start it. Basically, what it comes down to for me, and I think it's important because we've had conversations close to this. Like, I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that humans don't have wills. I'm not saying they don't have volition. I'm not saying that they don't necessarily make choices. But these are things that we ascribe to humans, and I think that they're part of what we call emergent properties. Like, they're properties that belong to certain phenomena, like, for instance, rivers flow. We don't exactly flow. You might be able to describe us in a way that the way that we progress through time is a flowing, but it's really a word that we use for rivers. And so, to me, that's what it comes down to. We are the ones who are willing things. We're the ones who are making choices, even though those things are a development through time. It's important to recognize that. Our wills aren't free in that they're restricted by our past. They're restricted by the way that we've developed through time because of our progression since childhood and because of our genetics. And so that's the way that I kind of break it down. So it's not that, that we're not involved in this process at all. We are involved. We are a cog in a machine that can only see the fruits of, we can only see what's in front of us. We can't see behind us. We can't see the thing that's moving us, but we can see the results of what we move. And so we falsely attribute the aspect of freedom to ourselves in a way that we shouldn't, because we can only see in front of us, if that makes sense.
So basically, Quay, what you're saying is we perceive ourselves as unmoved movers because we don't see what's moving us, but we see that we're moving other things.
Exactly.
And you're also saying that we actually make choices. So, I think we need to explore that also. Quaid, what is your take so far? Or Logan, rather, what's your take so far?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What's your perspective on this? Like, what are do you agree with what Quaid just said? What are your views on this?
On what he said about the will and our ability to have desires and such, and
right.
I would say I probably agree with them.
All right, let me ask a question.
Go for it.
Let's say we build a computer and we program it that whenever it's on wheels, it moves around. Whenever it comes into an obstruction, a wall or something, it's programmed to make a left turn. So the question becomes, when this robot goes and runs into a wall and makes a left turn, has this robot chosen that, or was it something that it had to do because of its programming?
I would say it did it because of its programming.
Yeah, what he said.
I would actually say that it chose it. I would say that, yeah, to me, chosen is a word that we use because of subjective experience. I see a dog, we can kind of break this down to animals or however you want to. It's probably not the best way to describe it, but from the subjective experience, there seems to be two options, and then an entity makes a decision between those two options for whatever the reason is, which is programming in the same way that we do. And we call that a choice. It has practical value in the way that we converse with each other, even though ultimately it is in the same way that you're using the computer analogy. Ultimately, the computer's decision does come down to the way that it was programmed. So that I agree with, but what we call choice behind that is ultimately our subjective experience interpreting the kind of summation of those events, it choosing between it having two options and then going with one. So it having the option of right or left, but then going left.
I would say it has two options it could have made. It could have made a left or right turn, but the decision it made was programmed into it, so it couldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah, I think that this is really a semantics game here. What I have to say is that, yes, Quaid is right that that's what we call a choice, is our subjective experience. Like, we perceive, like, let's say that robot was conscious and it perceived that it had options of left or right. But it was programmed to go left, and it's not aware that it was predetermined because it was programmed. So subjectively, it feels as if it made a choice, but I'm committed to the idea that because things are predetermined in that way, they are determined by prior causes, and since we couldn't have done otherwise, I say that there is no choice. But really, we are agreeing on the same thing. We're just using different language.
Yeah, I would agree, Chandler.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can explore this relative to, for example, the attribution of moral responsibility. I mean, we who reject the notion of free will, explain that we hold ourselves pragmatically morally responsible for what we do, but we're not fundamentally morally responsible. So, I mean, would that make it easier to distinguish between, the kind of choice that's kind of like a fundamental choice and like the appearance or the pragmatic use of the word choice, to semantically just basically express the idea that there are two quote unquote options, even though fundamentally there aren't.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it may be a practical thing, but I guess I'm so caught up on the fundamental reality of knowing it's an illusion that I find it hard to ever use the word choice.
Yeah.
I still use the word choice, but I probably mean it in the same sense that you guys do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Choice, I mean, like, yeah, and in a certain sense, choice is an illusion because just like free will, in other words, like if we don't really have a choice, if we're quote unquote choosing based on our programming, again, in a very fundamental sense, it's not really, let's say it's not really our choice. Then we have to explore whether we can attribute choice to the universe. But all right, so we've distinguished between, let's say, the pragmatic use of the word choice and the more fundamental. I think we're all in agreement on that. But then the question still remains. Well, for example, even with the word choice, is there anything that's choosing? Because we're seeming to choose. We use the word semantically, because it serves purposes. But can we attribute fundamental choice to anything?
Yeah, so that's where I would say choice does, like the way that you put it makes me say choice does exist. Is anything choosing? Yes, I am choosing, but I'm choosing because. Like that word because. Like it's attached to other things. Even though ultimately I'm the one who makes the choice, it's not just for no reason. There's things behind it. And that's where I don't want to attribute it to the universe, because in the same way that I'm saying that I have the choice, I understand what that means for my capacity. I don't exactly understand what that means when we attribute it to the universe. I don't know what it means to say that the universe makes a choice. I'm not sure what that looks like, in the same way that I know what it looks like when I see a human that has two options and ultimately makes a choice between those two options. I know what that looks like pragmatically. I don't know what that looks like when a universe does it.
I like how you said that. What does that look like when a universe does it? Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets interesting because whatever is doing what it does, it has to do that way according to the prior causes and the laws of nature, the way things are set up. And I think maybe what George is asking, and George can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but was there a fundamental point, was there a point at which the universe chose to make the law of gravity rather than having us all just float around with no gravity?
Right, and Chandler, that's a good point because, like, essentially, I'm asking a question without an answer. Because I think we all here accept the infinite regress, the eternal regress into the past, and so then one never reaches a point at which any choice is made about anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I view it, is that because things are always done by prior causes, any previous choices would have to be some previous causes, and so we have an absurd infinite regress, which I believe to be true, even though it's hard to grab onto.
But Quaid, I mean, but then you're saying, all right, we make choices, but the choices we make are not up to us.
It's again, so you have to dissect what it means by up to us. Yes, it's up to me, but what I decide it's up to is based off of previous. Like, yes, it's up to me as this focal point of other coalescing variables. I am a cog in a machine. So like the movement of the machine is up to the cog in so far as what has happened previously, that cog's movement is pivotal to the way the device moves in the future. So yes, it's kind of up to the cog in some weird way. If you remove that cog, the machine would cease to move. And
Well,
so
let's take the example, for example, of 100 dominoes, right?
Yeah.
And so we're the 99th, and would you say it's up to the 99th domino to tumble the 100th, or would you say that the 99th domino was compelled to tumble the 100th by the preceding 99 dominoes?
I would say it was
98, rather. Huh?
I would say it was impelled to do it.
Right, Quaid?
Yeah. Well, now that you're putting it as compelled, I don't know how I feel about that. But if you say it's up to that domino, what I think that is, if you remove that 99th domino, the other dominoes don't fall at that point. So it is up to that one domino.
It depends on how close the domino is.
That's true. But in terms of like the way that we're having this discussion, if there's space so much that without that domino, the other things won't move. It is up to that one domino to be there in order for the thing to continue.
Right. I think what you're saying is we human beings are part of the causal chain, or a necessary part. In other words, like, if you remove us from the causality of anything, then we can't do anything because,
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I don't know, to me, if I either want to say we make choices or nothing really makes a choice. Like, to me, that's ultimately what I want to say. I don't want to say the universe makes a choice just because I know what it looks like when a human makes a choice. I'm not sure what it looks like when a universe makes a choice. But if you want to break it down to its real constituents, humans don't even make choices. But at that point, I would just say, well, nothing makes a choice at that point.
I tend to agree with that.
Right, and actually, how about if we move from pure logic to empirical science? In other words, like, if we start with the standard understanding that the Big Bang is the beginning of the known universe, then I think we could say that the Big Bang is the first cause of everything that happens.
I think it's
scientifically. In other words, as far as we know,
I still think that's debatable.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree that's debatable too.
And guys, I agree with you. It's clearly debatable in terms of logic. Obviously, like the Big Bang didn't, isn't a first cause, something caused it. But I'm saying empirically, in terms of what science tells us, we can start with that event.
Yeah, I agree with you at that point. Yeah, you're right. In terms of empiricism, what we've so far said that is proven, the Big Bang seems to be the first cause.
Yeah. Okay, so then Go ahead, Chandler.
Yeah, what I want to say about it is that we will never be able to say for certain that if a Big Bang happened that it was the first cause, because it could be itself part of a series of the infinite regressive causes. So we'll never know.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, but Chandler, that's logic, right? In other words, like if we limit it to science, science tells us like the Big Bang is the first natural event over which we have any knowledge.
Yeah, I think we might need to, of course, I don't understand the Big Bang Theory at all, so I'm not necessarily going to say I agree or disagree, but what I will say is we may need to do an actual official podcast on that sometime about, well, how do we know there was a Big Bang? Is this empirical science, or is it just speculation based on some observations but not conclusive?
Well,
No,
Chandler,
it is.
Go ahead, Quaid. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, physicists agree that the Big Bang happened. When we start talking about like membrane theory, which is the idea that there's two other types, possibly universes that collided, which created a Big Bang, which created our own, that's not empiricism. That's not what we've proven to any theoretical degree. The Big Bang we have according to physicists. So like we can, if we trust scientists at all, which I just personally do, then I have to accept that the Big Bang is actually empirically proven, and anything before that isn't set in stone yet in terms of science. Science doesn't seem to have made any progress on membrane theory or alternate universe theories. Those are really hypotheses at this point and not scientific theories in the way that the Big Bang is.
Right, and Chandler, the empirical evidence for the Big Bang, there's several ways to demonstrate, or several kinds of observations that lead to the conclusion. One of them is that everything is moving away from everything else. And the second bit of evidence is like the background radiation that's predicted from that. And so they found that. So again, this isn't just logic. They have observations, and then they apply, scientific logic to them.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that everything seems to be moving away from the same location, right, basically?
By my understanding, a lot of physicists will say that the universe, has a Big Bang, which was like, you could fit a trillion of them on a pinhead, but it has no center. By my understanding, I think if the universe was that small, it has to have a center. So,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, it's hard to grasp. We've talked about it a little bit, but the idea that everything's moving away from everything else, it seems like a balloon to me. It just that because a balloon is the closest, it's the only real world object, or perhaps something else that explodes.
Chandler, when scientists use the balloon analogy, it's interesting that they don't use the whole balloon, because in other words, if they use the whole balloon, then certainly there's a center from which that expansion took place. But when they use the balloon analogy, they're talking about the surface of the balloon. In other words, you put some dots down on the surface of a balloon, and they're going to be expanding away from each other. But that's one-dimensional, whereas the universe is three-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird, and yet that's the only way I can sort of understand it is that like with a balloon, it's small, but then the whole surface all gets further and further away from a center point. Geometrically, there is a center, and my only problem with that is that I can't think of the universe actually being a shape because space is infinite, So it's sort of like with things being shapeless, you can't establish a center.
Well, I mean, basically, if you posit or if you conclude, like science does, that the universe was once so small that you could fit a trillion of them on a pinhead, then to me that's basic geometry. That means like it's a point in what comes to be known as space.
Yeah, so it's the origin point, at least. You could say, it was where it started and went out from there. So even though it may not be a big sphere or circle or whatever, where we can do it like a trick to find the center, we're saying there was an origin. Maybe that's the right word. Close enough.
Yeah, all right. So like back to, all right. So we don't, just like a robot, chooses to turn left at each obstacle. it's not really the robot's choice. I guess, scientifically, what we've been, proposing is that we would have to attribute that choice fundamentally to the Big Bang. And we don't have to get into what happened before the Big Bang, but, scientifically, the Big Bang compelled the robot to make this left turn, again, through the process of causality. So now we attribute to human beings and other life forms this quality of intelligence. We do intelligent things. We build computers. We develop language. We think. These are intelligent acts. But if we use this understanding that we've just gained through the exploration of choice and apply it to intelligence, wouldn't we have to conclude that our intelligence is not fundamentally ours?
It wasn't our choice to be intelligent.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing because, for example, when we talk about this stuff, it gets into, for example, ownership of property. Like I say, fundamentally, no human owns land. No one owns another human or another animal. Like nobody owns anything because nobody is the creator. No one's the author that, you know what I mean? No one can just claim. What I would say is that we are users. We use resources. We use things. But it's not like we own anything. So I would say, no, it's not our intelligence or our consciousness, because there's nothing that is ours. There is only the universe, really.
Don't tell that to Christians.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. Go ahead, Quaid.
I'd say it's like saying that, well, the river doesn't actually flow. Really, the universe flows. Like, no, a river is what we call an emergent property that the river does have that other things don't have, and we still say it's flowing, and that still has meaning. So I would still say that we're intelligent, but that doesn't mean our intelligence is, we didn't fabricate our intelligence. Our intelligence is a result of other events happening. But we wouldn't say that a river doesn't flow.
All right, well then, Quaid, the question becomes, how do we define what we term as intelligent? In other words, do we define it based on a mechanism, based on our having a brain with neurons that do quote unquote intelligent things ultimately, or do we define intelligence via what it manifests? Like some living organisms do things that, one couldn't describe as very intelligent, whereas more quote unquote advanced organisms do behaviors or actions that could be termed more intelligent.
I think that intelligence is a complicated word. I know Magnus Winding wrote a book about defining intelligence recently that I haven't finished, but I feel like what happens with intelligence is that each person has a different idea of of an act, whether or not it's intelligent. Like, will we say that throwing a basketball into a hoop is an intelligent act?
Right, and that's what my point is. In other words, I think that we generally define something as intelligent by its manifestation. Yes, throwing a ball into a hoop is an intelligent act. Picking up the ball would be intelligent, but perhaps less intelligent, right? But it's always based on not the mechanism, for example, a brain or a central nervous system or whatever. It's based on, for example, a computer will do intelligent things with a different kind of mechanism than we humans. Do we agree on that?
No.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Hold on. Quaid?
No, I don't. I think it has to do with the idea of a membrane. I think that without the membrane, you're dealing with... Because otherwise, you would have to say things are intelligent which aren't sentient, which don't have a membrane. So to me, the membrane, the mechanism by which the action happens, is pivotal to the idea of attributing intelligence.
Okay, Logan?
I actually agreed with you.
All right, so let's Quaid, let's explore this. So you're saying now a membrane. What is it about a membrane that you are positing is essential to ascribing intelligence to something?
Well, first of all, it's systemic. There's a system going on that involves how am I trying to put this? Not cohesion. Well, partly cohesion, but basically collaboration. Yeah, collaboration. That's the word. Yeah, like but it involves a collaboration of cells that are acting mechanisms on their own that build up to that single act in a way that well, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you could attribute that to physical laws that are.
Yeah, what I would have to say is I would have to say that since the development of the brain, which we identify a lot with intelligence, since it's a non-brain that creates a brain. It's a bunch of cells that develop when a new organism is conceived and developing that creates the brain. So if a brain is intelligent, what about the act of the cells organizing to form the brain? Is that an intelligent act?
And we can go a step further, because basically what we're invoking is reductionism. We can go further and state that whether it's our brain or individual neurons or the DNA within the neurons, that all these actors, all these agents are not free. They're as much a puppet as we as a full human being are and as computers are. So in other words, like they, just as like we can't say that we freely choose or fundamentally choose, then whatever actions they're doing, they're completely compelled, right? Whether it's a membrane or a brain or individual cells.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is complicated stuff, but yeah, because like even if the cells did have a free will, which is incoherent, but even if they were free in some way, we would not be, as a full organism, free, because we'd be compelled by the free cells. Man, that reminds me of solitaire. But yeah, what's interesting is, yeah, they are compelled by the prior cause to do what they do, but I think we need to consider that whatever intelligence is, it has to be causal, meaning that it has to be the way it is due to the prior causes. So I suppose what we're saying when something's intelligent is that it's orderly and that it's not random, that it's not just a causal happening for no reason. Do you guys think that might be right?
I think you're both onto something. I just I have to think through this because.
Yeah, same here.
Hey, I'd like to ask Jessica what she thinks of this really nerdy conversation. Jessica, have you been listening to us?
No, it's really interesting, and I actually opened a dictionary and looked up the word intelligence just to see what it says, and forgive me for not having anything that's more unique to my personal perspective, but the dictionary says that intelligence is the ability to learn and to know. It's the level of this ability is measured on an intelligence test. It's knowledge, news, or information, or the getting or distribution of information, especially secret information. And when I read that, I was thinking that I think that when we hear about intelligence, we usually attribute it to something that is unique to a special secret or gift, something that causes us to grow in intelligence as a whole. It's not something that we usually personally, I would say that a book could be considered intelligent if you were thinking of like the molecular configuration of matter. I'm not really sure what to say other than that, concept. I don't believe that it's really necessarily the intelligence of the person or of like the personal life form that it is the configuration itself, the molecular configuration, how it reacts on a very small scale intelligence that really makes up all of the larger scale things that we would consider intelligent.
All right, Jessica. So, are you saying, in a sense, that that what appears intelligent is causal? In other words, like if you go to the like a brain, kind of like does some actions that then instruct our our hands to write something, or us our mouths to voice something that we would deem intelligent, but our brain is kind of like subject to what the neurons are doing, and the neurons are subject to causality. Are you saying something like that?
Oh, okay. I think that you're right about that, George. I think that I think that was a really good summary of what I was trying to relay with my comment.
Right. All right. So then, are we saying that since everything, post the Big Bang is the causal effect of the Big Bang, then everything is really, a manifestation, a causal manifestation of whatever intelligence we might deem, is within the Big Bang.
Could you say that again? I just want to hear it again just to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Sure. If we consider that our brains and our neurons and everything that we deem as intelligent, is subject to this causality, it's compelled by this causal process, should we then, conclude that this intelligence is just a manifestation of the fundamental intelligence that the Big Bang, being the beginning of this causal progression, represents? In other words, like, is the Big Bang the only intelligent entity, and everything following the Big Bang is simply, a manifestation of the Big Bang's intelligence?
I don't think so.
Yo, hold on. Give me a minute. I'll be back. Jesus Christ.
He's going to let his brain cool down.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I agree. I mean, I would say that I'm just going along with the Big Bang thing for right now. Whatever was happening at the Big Bang, that was the universe. That was all of existence, supposedly. And so whatever is happening now as a result of that. So anything that we call intelligent now has to be a result of we'd have to call what started it, the prior causes, intelligent, I suppose. Although I do think that there is a meaning of intelligence among human speech. There's different uses of the word intelligence, whereas there are other things that we say, oh, well, that's stupid, so that's unintelligent. And so I think if we're going to talk about intelligence, we also need to talk about stupidity. And let's get into about how our stupidity is not our stupidity.
Right,
Yes.
and Chandler,
Well, stupid as well.
absolutely. And anything that's stupid in the universe is attributable to the Big Bang, just as well as anything intelligent. Yeah.
Well, I guess I would have to define intelligence as the ability to learn and adapt to a situation or information.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could describe that to the universe, though.
Yeah,
I don't know
all
if
right.
you can adapt or learn.
But all right, think about it. Let's say we as human beings, whether it's our brain or our neurons, whatever, are learning. Is it really our learning, or is what we learned compelled upon us? Are we made to learn what we learn?
We are compelled to learn what we learn. I would agree with that.
So then is it, then wouldn't the learning belong to whatever compels us to learn?
That would be previous causes. I don't know if that would mean that those causes are themselves intelligent.
Right, and
Yeah.
that's where we go back to. Logan, you want to say something?
No, that was me talking. That was good.
Oh,
I was saying I don't know if we could ascribe intelligence to the universe. And
oh, sorry. All right. So, like, all right. Well, what happens is, basically, you're saying this causal process is what has what makes us learn. In other words, like, we can't decide to learn, over free will or anything to learn what we learn. But so it's this causality that makes us learn. But then again, at least empirically or scientifically, if we trace this causality back to its empirical origin, then it stops at the Big Bang. It's not a completely satisfactory answer, because then we get into logic. But at least empirically, would we have to assign any beginning of learning to this Big Bang that initiates the causal progression behind any learning?
I would say empirically the Big Bang is the beginning of the process that eventually led to me learning about such and such subject or whatever.
Yes.
These words have value when we talk about humans because of the way I think Jessica was onto something there when she talked about learning, and when Logan was saying something. For instance, there's no examples of the universe exhibiting any like classical conditioning behaviors that we know are evident in a bunch of carbon-based life forms. And that's one of the, when we start to talk about intelligence, when we start to talk about learning, that is a classic example that shows up that is missing when it comes to interacting with the physics of the universe. Classical conditioning. So where is that? Where is classical conditioning in some type of example? Because we're talking about learning, which is, again, has something to say about that with the universe.
Well, could we ask that same question of a computer? And before we ask that, would we would we agree that there is such a thing as computer or artificial intelligence?
Wait, are you asking if we agree that there is artificial intelligence?
Right, and if so, then like if whether that has manifests classical conditioning.
I would say the question is beyond me. I don't know if I have the intelligence. I feel like scientists are trying to figure this out right now. Like people who actually deal with robotics on a daily basis are asking this question. And I feel kind of inadequate when it comes to answering that question.
But Quaid, I mean, don't sell yourself short. We are addressing issues that academia has yet to address. This whole free will thing. Many physicists believe in free will. Many computer scientists who are working on what you were just referring to believe in free will. So try not to attribute more intelligence or understanding to them than we are actually expressing in this conversation.
I'm willing to have the conversation, but I think it's important to express, like, again, when we talk about consciousness, there are these people who have studied it for a really long time, and they have a very comprehensive, they have definitions, for instance. They defined it in such a way that is more advanced than the way that I could define it. And so when we apply that to robotics, Michio Kaku, who is a a particle physicist. I don't even know that he's qualified. It's not that he's not a really intelligent guy. I'm not saying I'm not intelligent. To me, I'm not selling myself short as much as just saying I don't know that I have the required knowledge to reach a positive or negative conclusion about it.
Right.
I'm just going to say, be careful when you use the words intelligence and smart interchangeably. They don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, because I would describe Michio Kaku as both intelligent and smart, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself intelligent and smart, and at least not in very many subjects.
All right, but like Kaku, for example, he believes in free will. I mean,
he believes randomness gives free will, and he's also a pantheist, and he has these beliefs, so.
Yeah, I know it, but to me, I take a different position. Like, I'm willing to call anybody, a bunch of humans intelligent because Well, I have studied it a lot, and once you ask what intelligent means, it begins to break down almost immediately, because intelligence becomes about what functions you can perform, and all humans perform different functions that other humans can't perform. It's like the old, it wasn't actually Einstein. It's a false quote, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll go its whole life thinking it's stupid. It's that same idea. Like we want to define intelligence, but when you ask intelligent people, like Stephen Hawking's, what intelligence is, they're like, we're not sure. We're not exactly sure. He doesn't like IQ tests because of what they indicate about specific intelligences, about what they indicate about someone's specific capabilities to do something, when in reality we can all do different things to different capacities. Like it's futile to have that type of conversation.
Right. I think Quade's point is very valid.
I wouldn't say it's completely futile, because, like, for example, there's a certain intelligence that allows a salmon to find its way from, somewhere out in the ocean back to the stream where it was born, I mean, we have no idea. But like with IQ, for example, it's not, I don't think we can like deem it coincidental that the IQ of the average Nobel Prize winner in science is about 150. So in other words, there is a correlation. It does have some validity.
Okay, well, what do you take then of people who have IQ ranges over 200 who are fundamentalist religious people?
That's a great question, Quade.
Good one, Quade.
Which is true.
I would attribute that to brainwashing. I think that, like, if you scare the hell out of somebody, if you tell somebody at 5 years old, if you believe a certain thing, you're going to suffer eternally. Somebody who's really intelligent might say, well, it's not going to hurt me to believe this, and they may be right. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I guess they hold some type of value, even though, again, there are a lot of smart people who say they don't. That say IQ tests are just completely ridiculous because they are a standardization of what a specific group of people deem intelligent. That's what the
IQ test means nothing.
Test.
Yeah, but again, like if you have the Nobel Prize winners.
122.
Yeah.
Well, see, I agree with Quade here, because here's the thing. Different people have different subjective things that they consider valuable, and if you can do those things, then you're intelligent in their eyes, and if you can't do those specific things, they consider you unintelligent. So some of us are a fish trying to climb a tree, because those who can climb trees, the monkeys, for example, are telling the fish that they're not intelligent unless they climb trees, so the fish try and they fail and they feel stupid. That's what happens in this world too often.
But guys, I mean, like, there's a guy, a psychologist, Howard Gardner, that he pioneered the understanding in psychology and science that as we're talking about, as we're saying, there's not just one kind of intelligence. There's what IQ measures, there's emotional intelligence, there's musical intelligence, there's athletic intelligence. There's a multitude of different kinds of intelligences. But again, there is a hierarchy among human beings. There's one person who's most musically intelligent compared to everyone else, and all. But I think we're getting sidetracked. I think, right? So, like, regardless of Quade, I think what you said before just brings us back to what we are discussing. I think what you were saying was that it's not the mechanism per se that we use to determine what's intelligent, but rather what's manifest, what actually happens. I mean, am I characterizing that correctly?
No, I'd still at this point, apart from other conversations we have, I still think the mechanism is important. I think the idea of classical conditioning, there's a bunch of tests that we consider a membrane, a carbon-based organ's ability to respond to new environments in a very rapid pace. We consider that learning. Again, with classical conditioning, the idea that, you've all probably heard of, Isaac Asimov. the dog salivating, basically. You know, the idea that they respond to food being brought and they eventually learn about that scenario in a very quick pace. We can't do that with, say, a solar system. We can't take a solar system and then throw something at the solar system, and then the solar system learns, like, oh, eventually this thing is going to be thrown at me. Like, there's just a different thing going on with not humans even. I don't want to ascribe it to humans, but carbon-based life forms, that they seem to be able to do these things. That isn't true of what we call, you know, non-sentient material. You know, rocks and mountains and rivers. They don't have that same response capability that we do. It's just an emergent property.
All right, but then compare that, for example, with the quote-unquote intelligence of the average computer that can sift through, you know, you guys probably know this better than I, but like, you know, gigabytes of information in a second, you know, to you know, make trillions of calculations, you know, much more swiftly than the human mind could dream of. I mean, wouldn't that, you know, so we are talking about like intelligence that derives from different mechanisms, and I'm not sure we can limit intelligence simply to organisms that manifest just one of them, like cognitive or classical conditioning.
You might be right.
Yeah, I think we need to ask the question of whether intelligence is a separate thing from learning. Because, like what Quaid was describing, is some things learn. They respond to new information that can change their behavior, and they can learn to behave in new ways. And so one thing is that that requires consciousness. That requires, you know, being aware of something in order to change. And whereas a computer, yes, it can do amazing things, but it has to be reprogrammed by a human. It can't learn on its own and just continually change and improve. So I think that there's an intelligence that can't learn and an intelligence that can learn. And carbon-based life forms, like Quaid put it, can learn. So they have a special learning ability, which is, I think, more important perhaps.
But Chandler, wouldn't learning need to be classified with every other kind of human activity that we do, in the sense that it's not freely willed? In other words, yes, we learn, but that learning is like the 99th domino in a chain of 100. That learning is compelled upon us. So it's like we're actually made to learn. And then, you know, like if we bring the cause, if we regress the causal chain behind every learning of every organism, you know, back in time, moment by moment, you know, ultimately we reach this origin of the Big Bang. And then the question becomes like, you know, did all the subsequent learning derive or evolve from an act of learning, or was it an act of knowledge? You know, in other words, was there a fundamental knowledge that didn't require any kind of learning at the point of the Big Bang?
Man, I don't think that's an answerable question.
Hey, Joel, have you ever heard of Bruno Latour's actor network theory?
No.
It's something you might want to look up, because it might be up your alley. You know, he's said some pretty I mean, he's a really intelligent, rhetorician. I think he's a sociologist too. But he's made that, tried to break down the distinction between agents and objects, and saying that objects have agency. And I've read a couple of his things and tried to he's got just basic articles on it that are like 20 pages long. But it's controversial and some people disagree with it. But, you know, I think it's an interesting concept, especially when we consider how humans interact. Like, we're always concerned with sociology, how humans interact. And then he kind of took it to the next level by talking about how basically we have these ordinary objects that do our jobs all the time. And we, for some reason, don't ascribe to them the same functions that we do ourselves, despite the fact that they're doing the exact same thing we are, like a doorstop, instead of someone who stands in front of the door and holds it. So it's interesting, but I don't know. I just don't know.
You know, I see the point in it, in that, like, if you take a reductionist view to reality, then ultimately, you know, like, for example, what makes the brain work is the individual neurons, and then you can break it down to the particles, you know, then the subatomic particles and all. I do get that. All right. So I think we've gotten to a point in terms of, like, this exploration where, you know, it does, as Quaid, as you were saying, get to, like, the fundamental definitions of intelligence and all, and it seems like we can ascribe intelligence to computers. You know, there's different kinds of intelligence, and they all derive from the Big Bang. But now let's go back to the questions of, because some of us, for example, Sam Harris posits that there may be randomness. He doesn't challenge randomness. Whereas some of us here, I'm a hard determinist. I believe there's nothing random. You know, everything, you know, has order. Everything is causal. What are our views on that, and how do we relate, you know, our conclusion on that to this question of like the Big Bang, how we're going to describe, you know, the nature of the Big Bang and the universe?
Well, yeah, I mean, see, because I'm a hard determinist too, so yeah, I think everything has a cause. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we get into some interesting territory of unanswerable questions. But what I want to say about what we've been talking about so far is, I think that if a computer, for example, is programmed to achieve a certain goal that was called intelligent when a human did it, then that computer also has to be called intelligent if it's doing the exact same thing. Because for me, it's about what happens, what is done. And so if it does seem like intelligence, it requires two things. It requires a goal to start out with. What is the goal? What is the intent here? And then a method of achieving that goal. So there may be, for example, differently written programs that have different methods of finding prime numbers, for example. This is common. One just does trial division with a list of previous factors, previous prime numbers, and sees if they go into a new number. Another way is to have a list of numbers and just have it, you know, do every 2, cancel those out, every 3, cancel those out, you know, all that sort of thing. So there's more than one way to achieve the same goal, and we can assess, like, one may be more efficient, one may take less memory, one may take, or in the human context, one may take less money, or it may take less time to achieve the same goal in one way as opposed to another. So I think intelligence, when we get down to it, is about the method of achieving the goal.
All right, Chandler, I think we are in agreement with you on that. You know, there's different, you know, well, not just the method, the sophistication of what's being done, the complexity. We are, I think, in agreement with that. But then the question, you know, becomes, do we attribute the fundamentals of this intelligence, regardless of what we're going to attribute to a fundamental order and causality in nature, or are we going to, like, allow randomness to be a part of this? Now, you said it's unanswerable. I actually, my position is that I don't see any evidence of randomness. I don't see any argument for randomness.
Well, what I'm going to respond to that with, George, is there can't be evidence for randomness. There can't be, because all evidence is about what causes something else. How can, like, that's the only thing that makes sense, is all evidence that people use to say whether it's climate change or evolution or evidence in a case of a murder trial or whatever. It's about what happened, what caused it to happen. So when talking about evidence, there's no room for randomness. It has to just be dismissed as a belief, but with no evidence to back it up. So I don't think that randomness or acausality is a respectable position.
Okay, let's go around. Jessica, what's your position on this?
I don't know if she's with us. It looks like she might have left the call.
I think she's gone.
That's all right, Quaid.
So yeah, I have a few things to say. So one would be to address Chandler. I mean, so essentially what you are saying is what which is what George believes, is that the universe is intelligent, because if what matters is the end product, or the thing that it does. I mean, the universe has done much more complex chemistry than we. It's made our whole system, our whole periodic table. So that is essentially chemistry. I don't know that I agree with that, but that is essentially what you say when you break it down to just the function of the thing rather than the thing that does the function. In terms of randomness, my position on randomness is I see what both of you are saying, and to some degree, I agree. I don't know if randomness is just a word we use because we don't understand how things work sometimes, and so they seem random. But just as an English major, I understand that words have value for whatever reason that they do, and so I don't know if the word random actually has value for a reason that I don't know, because I'm just not smart enough. Because I'm not, for instance, or not smart enough. I don't want to say that, but like, for instance, if you talk to somebody like Lawrence Krauss, a lot of smart people who are particle physicists seem to believe in random. So I don't know if they have some definition of random that really I don't understand. And if I did, I would say, oh yeah, randomness really does exist within the confines of that definition. And so, that's kind of my position, is I don't know whether or not randomness exists. I mean, ultimately, I am a hard determinist, so I do believe that even if random has this meaning behind it that is useful to humans, that really what we're saying is this event is caused by randomness. So it's still caused by that thing. And even the randomness, I don't understand how it wouldn't be caused by something else. But I agree with Chandler in that there seems to be something wrong with it, because if you want to say we have empirical evidence of something, what you're saying is that we see how it's caused. And so if you don't understand how randomness is caused, how can you say that you have evidence of it? So that's basically the outline of my position.
Right. And if randomness was caused, it wouldn't be a causal sense of random. And I do want to point out that when a lot of people, when they use the word random, just like when they use the word choice, it means something. When a person uses a word, they mean something by it, whether or not they're using the word correctly. But I think random means unpredictable. If it means anything, randomness just means, well, I can't predict what's going to happen, so I say it's random. And so I think that's what the meaning of randomness is, maybe.
Well, I think, see, prediction, for example, you can relate prediction to causality, and that's what Laplace did with his statement on determinism. He said because of causality, you could therefore predict everything in the future, know everything about the past. But I think randomness, more so than having to do with prediction, which is kind of like an ancillary aspect of causality, I think randomness is, all right, there's two main senses in which it's used. The first one is like, I've got a deck of cards, pick a card out at random, meaning, just don't even think about it, whatever. That's like the colloquial or metaphoric use of the word random, right? But I think most fundamentally, randomness is used as an alternative to causality. In other words, people will say, something is either causal or random. So and I think the most precise term to define or to use synonymous with randomness would be acausality. Logan, what's your take on this?
I'm just trying to figure out, like, where does quantum physics fit in with all of this? Because my take on randomness was that it was the other option to causality. It was causality or chance, randomness, There was either deterministic universe or indeterministic universe. So I'm not sure. I just, I saw Jamie, he posted something on Facebook about, nothing can, since nothing can't create something, acausality doesn't make sense. Therefore, everything is caused. And I don't know. I don't know what to take from that, and I don't know what to take from randomness because I'm not even sure if there is true randomness.
Yeah, I do. I want to respond to that is that some people do use random in the sense of meaning a causality, and that's why it's confusing because of the different usages.
Right, and just like, for example, like a lot of people will misuse the word free will, confuse it with political freedom, and also like, yeah, we've got to like not just talk about randomness, but like talk about it in terms of what its most valid definition is. And basically, for example, with radioactive decay, okay, that's, these physicists said, well, since we can't determine the rate at which a single radioactive isotope will decay, we're going to call that process random. But essentially, what they're saying is that we don't know what mechanism or what process is causing the rate of decay. So a lot of times randomness is used as an expression of ignorance, of a lack of knowledge of the causes of whatever phenomenon.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. What it is they're just calling it random as a statement of ignorance because they don't know something. So what I think is language hurts me. Like language in English is the only language I know as far as humans speak. It really hurts me, but I try to use different words to mean different things. So I prefer to use, I suppose I could use the word random in my speech meaning unpredictable, but I would rather say unpredictable just because random can also be conflated with not having truly any cause. So it's what?
You also say unpredictable because unpredictable means can't be predicted. You're just saying it's not predictable for you.
Right. Yeah, so you would say predictability is a subjective thing because one person may not be able to predict an event when it will happen, but some scientist who's more educated in that field may be able to predict it. So what we're dealing with is prediction depends on the knowledge and skill of the person talking. Whereas when we talk about things being indeterministic or acausal, that would be an objective fact if it existed, which I don't think there's any way to prove such a thing happening anyway, because you can't have empirical evidence. But the main point is that would be an objective thing about whether something or not is caused rather than a subjective thing about whether we can predict it or whether we know the cause.
Well, what about virtual particles that seem to pop in and out of existence without a cause?
Well, that's on, for example, like, all right, they're who knows where, and then we observe them, right? Now, if you take, for example, one of the fundamental laws of physics, the law of conservation of mass energy, and this law has never been violated to our knowledge. The law says that, that mass energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? So in the case of virtual particles, I think we have to conclude that they don't just pop into quote unquote existence. They were somewhere before they, manifested where we observed them.
And we have to consider something else, guys. I mean, like the speed of light, for example. If light travels at 386,000 miles per second, or whatever the number is, I think that's right. How do we know if things are not just really moving around faster than we can see? Because no human can observe something moving at the speed of light. There's no way a video camera, even if it's at 120 frames per second, there's no such thing as a video camera that has 386,000 frames per second.
Well, Chandler, no, wait a minute. They have measured the speed of light. I mean, like they've used technology to verify that speed. So it's not like we can't do it. And that, as human beings, we can't. But
no, what I'm saying is we can't see it as it's moving. There's no way to record it and see it frame by frame. There's no device powerful enough to actually see if a particle was moving at the speed of light. How we may think.
Wait a minute. I thought we had done that with light duality. particle
I
and
don't
wave
know what I don't know what that
with
is.
light.
What all I'm
With
trying to
photons.
say, guys, is that if a particle is moving at the speed of light, we may just think it just popped there when it really just traveled there really fast from somewhere else.
Well, it'd have to. Yeah, we've measured the speed of light, and like it's funny that you say that because creationists do have an argument where they say that the speed of light has changed over time, and so therefore maybe because we measure in a large part the age of the universe by the speed of light, that in fact it's a lot younger, 6,000 year old in fact, because the speed of light has changed, and because the way that we measure the speed of light has changed over the
They're
last.
still going on that whole thing that the universe is 6,000 years old or something.
Exactly. But we do we've measured it through time. We've been measuring it for 100 years now, and the most recent ways that we've measured it are more accurate than the ways we measured it before. So we do have a pretty good sense of the speed of light. If that's
and I think that people approximate things because it's not like the speed of light cares about our base 10 decimal system that humans use. It's probably not exactly 386,000 miles per second. It may be slightly more or slightly less, but people have to round it to the nearest 1,000.
That makes sense. All right, so I just want to propose there is a way to kind of disprove randomness or acausality. In other words, because if we start with the premise that everything that's happening today in the entire universe is the causal result of this state-by-state evolution of the universe. In other words, the universe starting at the Big Bang and the second moment creating the third and the fourth and all, then if we start with that premise, then for something to be acausal would mean that something happens without the universe existing before it happened. Do you guys see that line of reasoning?
I think I do.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry. I'm a little slow on that one.
We start out with the basic cause of everything, everything we say, think, do is actually the state of the universe at the previous moment. And the cause of that is the state of the universe at the moment before that. And then this causal regression obviously begins with the Big Bang. So basically the state of the universe is actually the cause of everything. So for someone to claim that something is happening uncaused or random, that's the equivalent of claiming that the universe did not exist before the moment that whatever they're claiming happened uncaused or randomly.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with it because if it has no cause, it cannot have to do with anything in existence. There can't be anything in existence. There can't be a universe that would conflict with it. Sort of.
Excellent.
So that would mean something can come. That would mean something came from nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, right? Exactly. Yes.
Which is weird because here's the deal, guys. Now, I'm sure some of you guys know that, some types of creationists and Christians in general, they say that atheists believe that something comes from nothing, that the universe came from nothing. Which I think is a mischaracterization because, first of all, atheists believe all kinds of different stuff. But I don't believe that something comes from nothing. I agree with Jamie Soden on that one.
Right, and then Chandler, that leads to our next question. So if we're in agreement, if we're in agreement that all right, I think that causality, I think is an expression of order. I think we can conclude with that or agree on that. And there seems to be order in the universe, and I think we're in agreement that there are different kinds of intelligences, human intelligence being one, and that they all are manifestations of the fundamental intelligence that we call the Big Bang, right? Okay, now so basically what we're saying is that the Big Bang is intelligent, and naturally the Big Bang is the universe. So now how do we distinguish between saying that because I know although I'm a theist, the rest of you guys are atheists. How do we distinguish between saying that and concluding that there is an intelligent God?
Well, what's interesting, what I would have to say is that I do think that there has to be an intelligence, at least the way we've been talking about it. If it achieves a goal of, say, building the brain of any sort of animal, then it has to be an intelligent process. I would say. So yeah, there's an intelligence of the universe prior to us as humans having intelligence, and maybe before the other animals. But I would just say that that's not the same thing as God as understood by religions, as you know. The only reason I don't use the word God is because that's some man in the sky who wants to burn you in hell.
All right, and so Logan, Quaid, do you fundamentally generally agree with what Chandler just said?
No, I have a few things to say. One about the randomness. I'm still in the same spot from what I said previously. I'm still holding out that randomness. There's too many things that have happened where I thought something was wrong, or I thought a word didn't have actual value, and then I learned how scientists use that word, and then I was like, oh shit, I'm wrong. I thought I was right because I haven't thought about this thing in the way that you guys have. So I'm still holding out that randomness has a meaning that I don't understand that is used by qualified experts.
Well, no, you're right. You're exactly right in that. Absolutely. And indeterminism is the same thing. Indeterminism means different things in science than it does in philosophy. You're right.
I agree totally. Because here's the deal. The way that our friends and family use a word, the way scientists use a word, and the way philosophers or religious people use it, they can all be different groups of people using the exact same word to mean totally different things, which is problematic, as I'm sure you probably all agree, because if we never know what somebody means by the words they use, because they could be any of 30 different definitions, how do we communicate?
Yeah, but I still agree with the cause effect idea behind it. The idea that things are caused, by everything, and that ultimately there seems something strange about saying that, one of these things doesn't actually have a cause, here. And I don't know what that means, so I reject it because I'm unclear about what it means. I'm still not on the universe is intelligent thing because, again, to me the idea of saying something is intelligence has practical value to us, and then there are certain tests that we can do which give that word meaning. They give the word sentient or intelligence meaning when you classically condition a dog to salivate at the sound of a bell in a way that you can't do with like a solar system or a planet or the universe as a whole. Or when you, not classical, what is the other one? Not classical conditioning, but, well, there's different types of conditioning that are done, and they're done on carbon, they're done on, well, I don't want to just say carbon because I do agree with your assessment of possibly robotic organisms as well. There's something else I want to add to this. So there's an idea here as well that I think is, in terms of randomness, interesting to think about. So we can tell, for instance, whether or not a number is quote unquote random and not random. And the way that we do that, so for instance, if you tell a human to make a random number of sequences, okay, so you just tell them write out a random number of sequences on a piece of paper, right? And then you do this by quantum mechanism. So you allow a quantum mechanism to decide whether or not you'll use a certain number or not. We can always tell when it's a human versus that random mechanism. And the reason is because humans repeat, the human repeats less numbers than the actual quantum mechanism does. The quantum mechanism repeats more numbers. So you're more likely to see an occurrence of strands of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, than you would from a human. So in terms of that, it seems that that what we would say, like, that human sequencing of numbers is not random, it's intentional. It's intending to write down a series of numbers based off of the way that it does, is just, you can distinguish it from quantum mechanics, which we're calling random. And again, I would just say this applies to the whole universe. Like, when we say that a human is intelligent, or a human has a will, a human enacts something, right? A human acts in a certain way. It has value for us to say that the human acts in a way that the universe does not act because of its usefulness.
I think I understand what Quaid is getting at. A person who is asked to give a sequence of random numbers, they're trying not to repeat the same numbers because they're trying to make it unpredictable, whereas a computer would not care, for example.
Right. Exactly. Not care, not trying. These are things that we attribute to a membrane and the way that we organize and distribute information, which is fundamentally different from the way that the universe does. And so it means something when we say we're intelligent, in a way that it doesn't mean the same thing if we want to say that the universe is intelligent.
Aren't we back to the same consideration that our quote unquote intelligence is a manifestation of this causal regression that originates in the Big Bang? So in other words, yes, yeah. we do these things through classical conditioning, but we're compelled by the Big Bang to do them.
Right, in the same way that a river is compelled to flow, but you don't say that the universe is flowing, you say that the river is flowing. And to say that the universe, you might be able to say that the universe is flowing. You might be able to say that we're flowing, but you're changing what it means to say when you say that, which is fundamentally different than what you say when you say a river is flowing.
I mean, a river flowing, that's something that we attribute to a river, I think, very specifically. Or, I mean, electricity flows, I guess different things flow, but isn't intelligence a different kind of concept than flowing? I mean, don't we attribute intelligence to like computers? My position is, some of us would attribute intelligence based on, for example, on biology, on having neurons and a brain and all, whereas my view of intelligence is that it's something can be described as intelligent, not dependent upon what causes it, but dependent on what expresses it. What are the characteristics of this act that we deem intelligent?
Huh.
Yeah, no.
I don't know. I think there's a difference in the way that Quaid uses the word universe and the way that George uses the word universe, because the river is the universe. Because if, like, George and I would say the universe is everything that exists, so in a way I would say, yeah, we say the river flows. We don't say the universe flows because we're talking about a specific part of the universe, the river. But when a human does a certain thing that we can call an intelligent reactor, if we call it a choice or whatever, that is the universe doing it because that human is the universe. So I find that what Quaid says, he doesn't know what it looks like when a universe does that. Well, you do, because anytime someone does it, they're the universe doing it. So this is where we get into, is the word universe helpful?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and this is like, there's Hegelian, or George Hegel, the idea that how do you define something without defining the whole universe first, and so I understand it. It's an old dilemma that I comprehend, but in terms of just everyday use of the word, I'm hesitant to ascribe certain words to the universe in the same way that I'm hesitant to ascribe certain words to the universe because of other phenomena, like again, a river flowing or a rock rolling. Is the universe rolling? Like, well, a rock rolls, and a rock is a part of the universe, so a rock rolls. Like, so the universe must roll. Like, and then at that point, like, how is that useful to us to say that the universe rolls, and what does that mean? It becomes harder to picture apart. It becomes harder to picture apart from just picturing the rock rolling. And you go back to the rock, which is really an organism of the universe, not the universe itself, that there just seems to be a difference there. It's like saying that, well, my kidney filters out poison, so therefore I, as a whole organism, must filter out bad, things that I don't need. Like, no.
Quite, I agree with you. That was like what Chandler was, I think, agreeing with you on also, is that there are certain things in the universe, certain behaviors, certain patterns, certain things that are happening that you can't attribute to the entire universe. But then there are certain things that you can. For example, the flowing river would manifest order. And then, like, we could also say that the universe, that order is a fundamental attribute of the universe. So again, like, not everything that happens within the universe can be ascribed to the entire universe, but certain fundamental things that happen within the universe, must be described, fundamentally, by the entire universe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm honestly still on the classical conditioning thing. Like, that's a perfect example. Like, we can classically condition humans and other life forms. In fact, we might even one day, if we want to know whether or not a computer is intelligent, try that thing. And that'll be tough too, because it's like, well, didn't you really just program it to be classically conditioned? But in terms of like figuring out whether or not something can learn, which we attribute to intelligence in a high capacity, those words are related to a high degree. The universe doesn't seem to be able to do that.
I would challenge learning being a criteria for intelligence. And the reason I would challenge it is because, for example, many organisms for example, like birds, there are certain species of birds that know how to create a nest. They know how to build a nest, but this is something they've never learned. That building a nest, I think we'd have to define it as an intelligent act, but this is innate. This comes within, the DNA that they're born with.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question as well. I'll grant you. It is really, because there seems to be a certain amount of intelligent capacity that involves not learning things, right? I mean, it involves DNA, it involves passing on genetics, but at that point, then we're admitting that it involves genetics. So, like, I don't know, like, what you just said was that it's involved in their DNA and their genetics, which again, the universe doesn't have. So we're back to intelligence still being attributed to carbon-based life forms.
No, but then what happens is then we have to explore, what governs the nature of genetics. In other words, then we're back to the fundamental laws of nature.
Yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's mucky, but I think I'm getting there. I think I see what you're saying, and I just kind of need to mull over it a little bit more. But I definitely see what you're saying. It is. There's a causal regress here that is involved with function. It seems kind of it begins to be arbitrary, right? To like draw those lines, of, well, this is really where intelligence comes from. It starts right when you have DNA and not previous. Well, why? Why does it start when you have DNA? I'm not
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Chandler, I think you proposed, you were suggesting that the term universe doesn't have a use. Can you describe that in more detail? I didn't understand that point.
Yeah, well, I absolutely can, because here's the deal. I feel like universe is sort of a geographical statement. Like where is George? Well, George is in the universe. Well, where is George in the universe? Well, I don't know, but he's in the universe. Whereas we have to get specific. George is on a planet called Earth, on a continent called North America, in a country called the United States of America, in a state called New York, in a city called Manhattan. So what we have to do here is we have to get specific about, well, yes, the universe is rolling. But it's real. But what I mean is that there's a rock rolling down a hill at this specific location, and there is a river flowing at this specific location. So I think universe is a general term that is a little bit too general, because we talk about, well, what specifically what domino is falling over. Yes, the domino is part of the universe, but which domino is it?
Right, but Chandler, I think relative to our exploration of free will, the reason the way it comes in is like, we're rejecting the notion we don't have a free will. Things are not up to us, quote unquote. And then the question becomes, well, if things aren't up to us or any of us or any living organism, to whom or what are they up to? Naturally, a theist would say God, a scientist would say universe. So naturally, the term universe, I think, is inescapable because, like, we find ourselves in a reality, and it's one reality. Sometimes people talk of multiverses, but if there are multiverses, they would all comprise one reality that includes them all. So again, like the universe, I think, has utility both in terms of like describing, this oneness to everything and describing, let's say, the authorship to all that happens.
Well, what's interesting about it, George, is that while I agree that we're all one, there's just one reality and we're all part of it, that whole monism thing is great. But at the same time, I find it difficult to say that anything is up to the universe because I feel like the term up to what people say their choices, for example, are up to them and making it sound like it could go either way, as if there are really alternate possibilities. But I'm saying the universe is deterministic and there's no way to have a choice be up to a human or up to the universe because it's incoherent.
All right, good point, Chandler. So rather than, I think up to is not more accurate. I think the more accurate term is caused by. So the universe causes everything. You're right. It's not up to the universe because who knows? Like this eternal regress where we never reach a point of decision for anything just makes this up to-ness, as you're saying, incoherent. Good point.
Exactly. We still identify what caused something, like a hurricane caused that house to be blown away. We can still say that. It just wasn't up to the hurricane. It didn't have a moment of choice where it could have decided to not blow the house away.
Yeah, now I'm on the same page with both of you. And that's my problem with even the idea of intelligence. So I might be willing to agree that really intelligence it's not a real word, or choice, or any of those aren't real words. They're words that we use to describe something that we don't fully understand because of the causal nature of the universe and how complex it is. But I wouldn't want to then ascribe it to the universe either. I would just as soon as say there's no real thing that's intelligent.
All right, so I guess that's interesting. I think we can reach agreement on that.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with that. I mean, I really think that intelligence, unfortunately, is a little bit too conflated with the idea of authorship. It's conflated with the idea that this person is intelligent because they are independently choosing or causing things. They're independently causing. People who believe in free will, like for them, if they think that when we say that if there's no free will, they hear that and they think, oh, then we're not intelligent. We're just a machine that does what it does. And I'm like, well, if you want to call the machine intelligent, then do so. But it's just sort of like this intelligence is a word that doesn't really add anything. Things happen. We have wills. We have desires, that is to say. We do what we intend, and some of us are better at doing certain things than others. But intelligence doesn't really add any meaning to it.
All right, but wait a minute. So, like, if we agree on that, wouldn't we have to agree that there is no fundamental causality either? In other words, like, that we can't say that anything caused anything else because of this infinite regress.
No, I don't think so. Things are caused, but that doesn't mean that because causality is true regardless of whether we call things intelligent or not.
No, but what I'm asking, Chandler, is not whether causality is true, but whether we can attribute causality to the universe or anything else.
I guess you can't attribute it to anything. Causality just is what it is. It just does what it does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah, I guess the question is sort of like, well, saying, who owns George? Who does George belong to? Who has authorship over George? And George is going to say the universe, but I'm not going to argue with him on that.
Well, no, what I've just said, Chandler, is that, basically we can't, because of the infinite eternal regress, assign authorship to even the universe.
Right, and that's what I believe. That's what I'm saying, basically, is we can't assign authorship or being the freely willed agent of any choice. So yeah, in a sense, yeah, there's no ownership. So I don't know, maybe intelligence has certain uses in certain circles of humans, how they use it, but I'm okay with saying it's an illusion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and again, right, it's like, for example, like choices, yeah, we make choices, but we don't fundamentally make them. Intelligence, we manifest intelligence, but and actually, we can, in terms of causality, most fundamentally, we can't attribute it to anything, but scientifically, like how we started the podcast, we can attribute it to the Big Bang, and in terms of the empirical evidence.
Yeah.
But all right, so now how do we distinguish between this universe, that causes everything, and the concept of God or theism? And relative to this, what I want to start this out with is that I don't think it'll be accurate or intelligent to go by the conventional definition of God. To for example, like what I'm positing is our God in the universe synonymous? And so, I'm not sure we can use the conventional understanding of God to explore this, just as with the free will issue. If we were to use the conventional understanding of free will, with the free will issue, we would have to conclude, oh, yes, free will exists the way most people believe it does. So I guess I want to start this out with, if we're going to, explore whether God and the universe are in fact synonymous, I think we have to start with an accurate description of God and I guess perhaps of the universe.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about that before, and I think, George, you may agree with this, that we certainly can't go by some ancient book like the Bible or Quran about what it says about God, because I think that conflicts with God being the universe.
It's inconsistent as hell.
Well, it doesn't and it doesn't. It depends. For example, the God, for example, is defined by the Bible firstly as the agent that created the world. So in other words, if we relate that to the universe, then we could say that the theological creation of the world is the equivalent to the creation of the Big Bang.
Well, and many theists
I would agree with that.
Yeah, many theists actually do that. My point, though, is that if a person picks out certain Bible verses and certain teachings of religions, yeah, they can do that and say those aspects are compatible with, say, pantheism. But then there's the aspects of where God is literally talking to somebody in Hebrew, telling them to sacrifice their son Isaac as a burnt sacrifice. So in that case, God is a human saying something to him.
Right, and Chandler, that's why I started with, we need to accurately define God. And for example, that is, all right. God said to Abraham or to Isaac, whatever he said, all right? If we have the understanding that the universe is really, or the Big Bang is the originator of everything, then in a certain sense, yes, that God, or like, in other words, everything that I'm saying now is authored by the Big Bang. Just as like, everything that Abraham or Isaac or any of the people in the Bible heard was authored by the Big Bang or the Creator.
Yeah, if you limit it to just that and you don't necessarily get into the other parts of the Bible where it says that God spoke this and commanded this nation to kill this nation and stuff, and you do just view God as the universe, that's something entirely different. So I agree with you, George. I just think that when people take these holy books as a whole, they take them as one big thing, and they try to say that it all is accurate. And obviously, you don't agree with all of that. So I agree that we need to, if you're going to have a definition of God, it has to be an accurate one. It can't be inconsistent.
Exactly. So then that's where the point at which we are now. What is an accurate definition of God?
All that exists.
Yes, I think that's probably the first characteristic of God. God is all that exists. And that doesn't have to rely on the Bible naturally. I think that relies on, how God came into being as a concept. Does anyone contest that God is accurately defined as all that exists?
Well, I don't know. I think, I'm not going to contest it, but I know that Christians don't believe that.
Chandler.
They might. If they believe that God is omnipresent or present in all things, you can almost argue that they do believe that.
Well, what's interesting is, I see your point there, but they view, there's the universe, but then there's God who's outside of the universe.
But that's also because they define universe differently from God.
Hey, I know, guys. I just thought about something. What Logan said reminded me. Maybe they have the wrong definition of universe. Maybe that's the problem, is that they're defining the universe as something different, and there's where the confusion may lie.
But Chandler, let's return to, in other words, we can't go by the popular definition of free will in exploring this concept of free will, because the popular definition is wrong. So in other words, we're striving for a definition of God that is exclusive of Christianity and whatever kinds of misconceptions there may be. You know what I'm saying? So it's irrelevant what the Christians or Jews or Hindus say. We're trying to arrive at an accurate description. So I think.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, George, but here's the deal. For example, Mitch has said this before. I think it was Mitch that said this. Why use the word God? Why not just say universe?
All right, let's the quick answer to that is that because God existed before the term universe, but that's an ancillary kind of consideration. Let's stay with defining what we mean by God, and see how it relates to the universe. So again, if we concur that God is accurately defined as everything, then I think we also conclude that the universe is accurately defined as everything, and so that in that sense, in the sense of everythingness, that God and the universe are synonymous. I think we would conclude that, not again from Christian doctrine or Hindu whatever, but from this kind of basic logic of what the terms mean.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's true. That would be the same thing,
All right, so then, what would be if everythingness is the first fundamental characteristic of God? What would be the second?
Well, what could be secondary to everythingness?
Well, I would think that that God, the second characteristic of God is that God controls everything. It's God makes happen what happens.
Well, isn't that causality?
Exactly. That's my point.
So would you say maybe God is causality?
Yes.
Well, that would entail everything. If God is everything, then God is causality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think in that sense, yeah, I can't find any disagreement with that.
Okay, is there a third, you know, characteristic of God that's accurate, that we can accurately define God as?
You could almost say a creator, in a sense.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think we have to define the word creator, but I mean,
I think
as
we
in
need
not
to
not ex nihilo, but a creator as in the sense of design or making new things.
Well,
I
yeah,
think you're
I
right.
think it gets into what it means to create because, yeah, we would have to go by a definition of create, whereas when a kid is playing with Play-Doh and makes shapes out of Play-Doh and builds a Play-Doh house or whatever, we don't say that they created the Play-Doh. They didn't pop the Play-Doh out of nothing, but they formed it into something else.
Yeah,
Right, and
I
I
like
think
that.
we can invoke physics, I think, to accurately define creation. In other words, like within physics, there is again that law of conservation of mass energy that says that mass energy, which actually is everything, can neither be created nor destroyed. Right. So in other words, like so, and we have to recall that the universe begins at the Big Bang. So I think scientifically, I think we would ascribe creation to what created the Big Bang.
Yeah, but I want to tell you guys that it actually is my bedtime, and so we really need to wrap this up. I mean, it's been a really interesting conversation.
All right, so let me just like summarize this last part that basically like if we, you know, again, if we went to the popular understanding of free will, you know, we could not attempt to disprove it because most people just don't know what it means. The same way, if we went to some conceptions, some biblical or Christian or Jewish conceptions of God, I'm not sure they're accurate. But if we wanted to find God kind of like logically, fundamentally, as everything, as what controls everything and what created everything, then you have this, you know, God and the universe being synonymous. And then again, we can explore what that means in terms of practical implications, I guess, on future podcasts. But and this, you know, we didn't get a chance to get into this, but this really does have a lot to do with the concepts of intelligence and randomness and causality and order.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing about this episode is we're clarifying all these terms. We're trying to get at what is the meaning of some of these terms. What practical meaning is there that we can use these as? Yeah, so it's interesting for sure.
Sounds good. All right, Chandler, close it up. This has been excellent.
All right, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs, George Ortega, Quaid, Logan Meyer, WSD, and Jessica joined us for a bit. And so we've been talking about consciousness, intelligence, randomness, and universe, and choice, and all these interesting terms that people can't always agree on what they mean. But I think we have come to a better understanding of what each other are talking about through the use of many words. So I hope this was educational and entertaining. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.